Alright folks, welcome back to the channel. Sorry about the delay on this one. I did want to invest enough time in this to give a good first impressions on Remnant 2. That's what I'm covering today. So maybe the first thing you might ask is, what is Remnant 2? I think you'll hear a lot of people say it's a Dark Souls light or a Dark Souls with guns, but I think that's slightly unfair to this game, really. And I know some people don't like the Dark Souls formula, and what I find is this is actually a nice entry point for folks who aren't massively Dark Souls fans, and at the same time it satisfies the need of using guns instead of melee weapons. Now, just to be clear here, there is melee attacks and melee systems in this game too, but ultimately they're secondary to the gun combat itself. The other advantages I find that Remnant 2 has over all the other Dark Souls types of games is that when you die, you don't actually lose any experience points. That being the difference between Dark Souls, because Dark Souls has that risk-reward system where you can continue to accumulate souls, I suppose, without spending them. And if you actually die, you'll lose all those souls. But within Remnant 2, I mean, you don't actually lose points in this. There is no experience to be lost. Even if you die, you just simply spawn back in the checkpoint. The other thing I find that this has an advantage over the Dark Souls games is its co-op integration. I mean, it's 4-player co-op straight off the bat. There's no stupid medallions to use to spawn people or anything. You can just simply jump in and play. The other aspect that makes Remnant 2 differ from any of the Dark Souls games as well is that the environments themselves are randomly generated. Now, there are zones, so there's, I think, 8 in total. I'm covering just the first zone here just to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. And the aesthetic of this zone is kind of actually influenced by Bloodborne in a way. So I did like that style of the first area. But anyway, in a nutshell, the aesthetic of each zone will be the same for every player. However, the layout, the structure of when you meet the bosses, plus what types of dungeons, items, and enemy locations will ultimately be different from everybody else. So that allows for a lot of variety, not only within your own game, but if you feel like jumping into somebody else's game, it will ultimately be unique. And the other thing as well is you can carry forward your progress from one game to the other. So you can pop into someone else's game, continue to level up, jump back into your own game, and continue on. Now let's talk about the most important aspect of this. It has to be the shooting itself, because you're going to be doing a lot of it. So how does it feel to shoot? And shoot repeatedly. It's tight, it's responsive. I'm playing the Hunter class here. Easy to pick off headshots. I'm using a PS5 controller. When I played the original game, I also played on console, and for me, that is the biggest improvement between the original and the sequel. By far, the responsiveness, accuracy of the controls, and how easy it is to aim. So as I mentioned as well, there's multiple classes that you can choose from. The game refers to these as archetypes, but actually later on you can gain more than one archetype. So you can actually combine into 2 classes, which is really good, and again adds another layer of variety to your builds. Each area or zone that you're in as well has a map system, so you can see where you're going, you can see where the dungeons are, you can see where your primary and your secondary objectives are as well. And I gotta say as well, this game has its scary moments. This jump scare here absolutely nailed me pretty early on in the game too. So as I said, it's got that Bloodborne feel, but it's actually, this area as well has got that kind of dread horror feeling to it as well. So yeah, stick on those headphones, turn it up loud, turn off the lights if you want to get freaked out. Some other important information to share with you about the game as well. As I mentioned earlier, there is a melee system. Again, it's secondary to the gunplay, but the melee system in this has also been vastly improved from Remnant 2. Feels much more satisfying to take somebody out. I've got a kind of big mad machete here, I've been upgrading that, so very, very satisfying to use that as well. There's also a central kind of hub area where you can buy items, equipment, resources, and you can also upgrade your weapons in this area. So you'll find yourself traveling back and forth to this area a lot. If you get stuck, for argument's sake, and you need to level up your weapon a little bit more to give you a little bit of extra oomph against a boss you're struggling with, this is where you do it. The trait system does return from the original game as well, which is pretty much like a basic skill point where you can increase your health, your stamina, all the kind of basic stats that you get with this type of game. And then lastly, of course, it's got the checkpoints, something similar that you'd see the campfires of Dark Souls, where again you can move from zone to zone and then move back to the campsite again and travel back and forth. So let's share my final thoughts on this. I really like this game. If you want something different, something akin to Dark Souls but a little less stressful, not to say it's not challenging, you will enjoy this. However, if you didn't enjoy the original Remnant, I'm not quite sure there'll be much here for you to enjoy in the sequel. But anyway, that's it from me, guys. Please share your comments down below if you played Remnant, and I'll talk to you soon.